Hello everyone, I'm Don Stacy. I'm going to continue reading from my collection of science fiction stories. Here's what the cover looks like on this self-published book. Tales of the Bizarre and the Natural. And we'll start off today with the transit of Dorothy and Zebulon. Last time we finished two of them, The Cave and More Torsion for Thompson. Yeah. Oh, it came after the sports facility, that's right. Okay. The transit of Dorothy and Zebulon. Who's looking over your shoulder now, Zebulon? The boy looked up. Why, it's only you, Mother. For a second I thought Dorothy had said that to me. The woman bent down and brushed her cheek across his own, a fleeting, grazing touch. And then she pulled away, now holding him by the shoulders, and said, Mommy and Daddy are going out to have dinner tonight with two of our friends, Zebulon. So you'll be here with Dorothy, and you be sure to mind what she says to you, young man, understand? She said, rocking him slowly backward and forward a few inches each way. The boy laughed, faintly puzzled, yet delighted that he could now play a lot of different games with Dorothy. Dorothy helped his mother during the day. She was younger than his mother. She had her own rich mixture of smells, from the hand lotion she used to the scent of the makeup on her face. He thought Dorothy was the prettiest woman in the world. Once, during a moment of elation, while having been playing a game with Dorothy, he paused and said to her in an unusual tone, as she thought of it later, "You're the prettiest woman in the world." Rather precocious of that lad, wouldn't you say? She found the boy to be bright and cute from the day she first met him, on the day she had first come to their house for a job interview. After she was hired and started arriving at the house each day, the boy's world had begun to change. He had never known anyone like Dorothy, and she began to treat him like a younger brother, someone who was decent but still didn't understand anything. Dorothy introduced Zeb, as she began to call him, to all sorts of things he'd never heard of before, like hip-hop music and R-rated movies, and all her new words he'd never heard before, and he had become completely enchanted by her. Presently they were both sitting next to each other on the rug in front of a large television mounted on the wall. They had just finished playing a video game, and at the moment the television was a blackened screen. We'll light up the smoke here, so brief intermission. Let's see. It's always a problem finding matches around here. Of course, this is my living room, as much as you can see of it. It's not a very large house, 2 bedrooms, 1 downstairs, in addition, which the realtors cannot count for some reason, because the windows are too small. But that's fine. Anyway, lowered the price of the house. Let's see. He turned to her and asked, Dorothy, do you have a boyfriend? Do I have a boyfriend? Oh my word, Zeb, why are you asking me a question like that? Because if you didn't have one, I could be your boyfriend. You're too young, and besides, you're practically like my little brother. Oh, so what can we do while my mom and dad are gone? Dorothy looked at the boy fondly. Babysitting this kid could have its moments, she thought. I'm not sure. Do you want to do something you've done before, or something you've never done before? Never done before, he replied in an enthused rush. Okay, well, give me a chance to think about this. They put away the video game equipment and then sat at an uncovered black enamel dining table. The clock on the radio in the kitchen had said a few minutes past 7. I go to the 4th grade next year, he said, looking at nothing. Are you scared about that? No. Why should I be scared? I like school. Well, some people hate school. Do you hate school, Dorothy? No, little man. I loved school. I thrived in school. My mother was proud of me. 4 times a year, I'd take my report card home to get my mother's signature. I always had at least 2 or 3 commendables. That meant you did something pretty good. My school is only 3 blocks from here, he said. Ah, that's really close. So what can we do, he asked again, this time more impatiently. Well, first let's say what we're not going to do. We're not going outside, and we're not going to watch television. You, my little friend, and I will sit here in the front room and talk to our heart's content. Then, when you don't want to talk anymore, you can go to bed. Sound like a deal? With a skeptical voice, he said. But then what are we going to talk about? Whatever we want, she said. When you were with your friends, you talk about anything you want to. You haven't had all that many friends so far, have you, Zeb? No. Why do you suppose that is? I don't know. There are no other kids around? Your mother doesn't take you anywhere to play with other kids? No, I'm always right here at home. Well, how would you like to go somewhere else without leaving the house? The boy laughed and said confidently, Nobody can do that. I can, Dorothy said, and I'll teach you how. Dorothy began to teach Zebulon that night about the approaches to Abyssinia. What's Abyssinia? Abyssinia, an ancient city or some old country, somewhere in northern Africa. The days are hot, but the rains fall far more often than further south. You often see women in colorful flowing dress carrying large bundles on tops of their heads, supporting it with one hand. Have you been there? Yes. I'd like to see it. I'd like to go there and see it. You and I can go together, Zeb. I can take you. She took him to another ancient city as well, where everyone wore plain white flowing robes. The people moving about in the marketplace were tall and good-looking and very watchful. Keep your eyes open. You may have to jump out of someone's way if there's a chase going on. One person running after someone else. Thieves with quick feet live longer. Over there we can eat dinner. I have plenty of money. A person always needs money, Zeb. Even in ancient times people traded with coins. Their shekel was the basis of civilization and daily life. The boy looked all around, mesmerized by all the sights and sounds and smells which confronted him. The marketplace was entirely new to him, the teeming, countless people, the great piles of fruit, vegetables, spices, tea, the dangling carcasses of goats, pigs, and cows, chicken in cramped cages, fish in wide-brimmed urns filled with water, then all the clothing, piles of cloth, sandals, headscarves, pots, urns, iron woks, glass jars, tin goblets, deep vats of liquor, wine, and beer. In still another stall, a man was selling scrolls. Dorothy led the boy over to this stall and spoke to the man who kept watch over his merchandise. What's the latest thing you've got? New author from Egypt and another one from Babylon. And from India? Not this week. The journey is much further, you see. Of course, a pity really, Dorothy said. Zebulon looked up at Dorothy and said, "What are those things?" "Books," she said. "One time books looked like that. They weren't shaped like a little box of cereal." I got a new book the other day. My father brought it home for me. It had pictures on each page like a little kid's book. "What was it about?" she asked the boy. "Going into space and building a space station and living there." "This place is better," she said. "I think so too." She captivated him, and she was able to take him places which did not require plane ticket or passport. She could do this travel or performing of a strange slippage from one sector of space-time into another by some unaccountable procedure. Their bodies, of course, remained behind like so much excess baggage, while their transmitted physical templates could later follow along like the pulling of a rope. But the first round was always incorporeal, invisible. Dorothy and Zebulon visited many ancient cities. They attracted no attention. They were the minutest fraction of pure energy in a self-projected trajectory, always with specific termini in mind. They watched a spectacle of gore in the Colosseum in Rome. They watched the pillaging of Alexandria and the burning of the famed library there. They saw new cities being built in every part of the world with every kind of building from hut to skyscraper. But they liked the comparative simplicity of the ancient world, where technology had not yet grown into an entity of its own. Most tools were very simple. One time Dorothy took Zebulon to China, where they saw how bamboo had been used to construct corkscrews to bring water uphill to a crop. The corkscrew was operated by a windmill, so it didn't work all the time, but often enough to keep a flourishing crop of rice well watered. The bamboo had also been used in the construction of houses and larger buildings along the town square. They watched ancient Chinese villagers and city dwellers come and go along the many wide cobblestone streets. Everywhere the streets were filled with horse-drawn carts and smaller carts pushed doggedly along by their owners, all their wealth heaped for sale on a single cart. "That would be a crappy way to earn a living," Dorothy said. "They have to stand outside all day," said Zebulon. "They do, and it would be a hard life." Dorothy and her young charge even went home to rest from time to time. She had said to Zebulon early on during these historical adventures of theirs, "A person who can never just sit quietly in their own home and for a few moments remain engaged in nothing more than their own thoughts. Do you know, Zeb, that there are some people who can't comprehend why anyone would want to do this, to cut themselves off from other people and explore their inner lives? But having no friends is not necessarily the result. And so they sometimes sat together and did nothing for comparatively long periods of time, distracting themselves with nothing more than their own thoughts. People have forgotten that human beings once used to do this on a daily, if not hourly basis. Dorothy had once watched a Japanese film where the actors, one man and one woman, never spoke a single word to each other, and whose communications with each other consisted of long, reflective mutual gazes, and then a plunge into a world of intersubjectivity. The ultimate aim and hope of intersubjectivity is that every single mind in the world is thrown open to the notion of mutual involvement and understanding, with a far greater likelihood of a world ruled by diplomatic settlements rather than the vagaries of war. But there was then the suggestion that only by altering human nature could this be possible. Yet human nature, particularly as commonly seen within the scope of the law, must be viewed repeatedly to keep pace with change, the only truly ubiquitous process. These various questions become tangled quite easily, and confusion can corrode and finally maim ideas as surely as some men in Pakistan have maimed their unsubmissive wives with battery acid splashed onto their faces. The Machiavellian long view is not the answer. George W. Bush had amply shown that to be true. And then Dorothy kept thinking, Donald Trump even gets away with saying this openly in a debate, the audience reacting with grumblings or puzzled denunciations, unsure whether they are denouncing Trump or the Republican Party. Dorothy looked over at Zebulon and wondered what was going on in that boy's mind. He had to be imagining himself doing something, or maybe he might be trying to get back to one of those places just by using brute memory. That would hold his interest. She wanted to find out how long it would take him to get around to asking her to take him on another visit. Zebulon, meanwhile, was having quite a blast reliving some of those spectacles he had recently witnessed. But then she had taken him to many other places as well, like the ancient village in China in a place called Yunnan. There were enormous hardwood forests in that area, and the trees were cut to build homes for the wealthy. The men who cut this timber possessed a skill passed down from father to son. Dangerous work, but the men made a good living and had the respect of the other villagers. The homes of these craftsmen, however, were made out of mud bricks. All the women wore their hair quite long, while working women would keep hers rolled up and pinned in a bun. These other women, the wives and daughters of wealthy businessmen, would go about the village in their latest finery and greet one another as though in some frequently performed promenade. In summer they all carried parasols, which were sometimes plain white silk, though oftentimes decorated with a painting of a mountain scene or a dragon. Zebulon had been thrilled to witness a fight between two laborers who, people later said, had been in the habit of insulting each other with outrageous lies. Their sense of honor grew strained under all the mockeries they kept heaping upon one another as they loaded bags of rice onto a barge. They say the canal went all the way to Guangzhou. He liked this place best of all, so he turned to look at Dorothy and said, "Could we go back to that place in China sometime? We can go right now if you like." Of course, Zebulon did not say a word about these adventures of his with Dorothy. At the dinner table, when his parents both had gotten home from work and asked him what he had done all day, school being out of session at the moment, the boy made up some lie about having invented a new game on the computer, an activity which used to be his principal hobby, apart from staring out the window at the great collection of buildings which stretched to the horizon. At first his parents worried about this. They consulted a pediatrician and a child psychologist. Both of them said, "The boy's just daydreaming, a perfectly normal activity. Please don't let yourselves worry. There's nothing to worry about." As he listened to his mother and father talk about their day, he continued to eat his dinner in silence, delighted that they suspected nothing. Had they known, they first would have fired Dorothy and then brought charges against her on the grounds of child endangerment. Dorothy had warned him, Zeb, "You can't say anything about this to anyone. If your parents found out what we were doing, they'd say I was corrupting you with voodoo magic. So, not a word." The next time his parents went out on a date and paid Dorothy half again as much as she normally received, she spirited the boy off to Italy in the 16th century. She told him they were going to watch Galileo go about his daily labors for a while and then skip over to the time when he was being questioned by the Pope's special team of Jesuits, who were up to date on this new talk of the stars. The heavens all revolve around Earth. Any fool can see that if he lays down outdoors on a warm summer night and looks up at the sky for a few hours. And deep within the bowels of the earth is hell, yet something afar in the celestial sphere there lies a place called heaven, the place our faith tells us we all go to when we die, just as long as a priest is there to take a final confession, if it happens to issue forth, and then perform the last rites. They had watched Galileo and his two assistants perform experiments that could disclose the secrets of gravity. They watched him fashion a crude telescope, after which he wrote a letter to his toolmaker in Rotterdam and described what he wanted and included several detailed sketches. This device would soon get him into a great deal of trouble with the church. They heard Galileo exclaim, "I will eat shit for a week if I haven't spotted a moon of Jupiter. Why do I say a moon, my dim-witted Federzoni? Simply because it is equally possible that Jupiter has more than one moon, just as you are equally likely to hiccup once as you are to hiccup more than once. Thus, master, I am equally likely to fart once or to fart more than once." "Precisely, Federzoni, you crafty dog, you. When I next turn around, you'll be teaching me mathematics as well as logic." They followed Federzoni home, where he boasted to his wife that his ingenious master had discovered a moon of Jupiter. "What a silly thought! Everyone says Galileo is crazy, that all he does is read ancient books and gaze at the stars. He's just lucky he doesn't have to work for a living." Dorothy and Zebulon saw Galileo one more time. The last time they saw him, Dorothy had taken Zebulon to the secret enclave within the Vatican where Galileo was trying to defend himself against the charge of heresy. "You have published a paper, Galileo, a paper published in a learned journal, no less, in which you state that you have produced physical evidence showing that Jupiter has a moon, and that you have produced this evidence using a device you say you have invented and that ostensibly allows you to see things at a great distance. Is this not correct, sir?" Yes, Your Excellency. It's all very true," Galileo replied nervously. "Are you not aware of the doctrine of the Mother Church, which states that the earth resides at the center of the universe and all bodies in space revolve around the earth? Then how do you reconcile this phenomenon with the moon, which you say orbits Jupiter?" I cannot," Galileo said, shaking his head worriedly. "Galileo, you are a respected man in today's world of science. People as far away as England and Russia have heard of you. But the Church insists that you publish a letter through the means by which you published your discovery and assert that you had been mistaken, that what you saw had been brought on by fatigue. Whatever you want to say, but you must say that no such moon exists. You must say this, dear Galileo, otherwise we will be compelled to execute you as a heretic, as having committed not a crime against man, but against God. Do you understand?" "Of course, Your Excellency, of course. I understand. I will write your letter, the letter you say I must write, and retract my discovery. I will base this retraction on an insufficient amount of evidence, if that meets Your Excellency's approval. Before you issue this statement for publication, you must bring it to me first. You're a clever man, Galileo, and you may attempt to conceal your real thinking in platitudes and trickery. I will bring it to you first. Yes, Your Excellency." At this juncture, Galileo was allowed to depart from the Vatican, and Dorothy decided that she and Zebulon would return home. After leaving the house where Zebulon lived, she still had to return to her own home on foot. After dark, this no longer remained a straightforward matter for a woman. Some men remained brutal apes and savages, she thought. Today we call them criminals, rapists. Dorothy said goodnight to Zebulon and his parents, and after receiving her weekly check from Zebulon's father, she set off for the bus stop. She carried the latest anti-assault weapon in her purse, a device which emitted a powerful electromagnetic wave embedded with a whole array of psychic repellents. Essentially, her would-be attacker would, once she triggered the device, first fall into a highly suggestible state akin to that of having just been hypnotized. Then the device would implant in this individual's mind a series of terrifying images, all of which involved Dorothy in some central role as a female destroyer as powerful as Shiva. As the man experiences his sudden abject vulnerability, knowing that he is doomed, he will then fall to his knees in front of her and beg her to forgive him for having intended to harm her. At which point she merely continues on her way, leaving behind a man who now will remain terrified of women for the rest of his life and will no longer trouble anyone in the future. When Dorothy unlocked the door to her parents' home, she was greeted with the wondrous medley of cooking smells from the kitchen. "Is that you, honey?" Her mother's voice rang out as strong as a contralto's. "Yes, Mama." "You didn't stay with that boy very long tonight." The so-and-sos came home early. I think they might have had an argument." "You got paid, didn't you?" "Yes, Mama, I put the check on the dining table. I'm going upstairs to my room for a while. Just call me when dinner's ready. You don't need to climb all those stairs just to knock on my door. I'll hear you, I promise." "Well, you know I'm going to sing in church this Sunday. I don't want to waste my voice a-hollering up at you, Sugar Plum." "I promise I'll hear you," she said, growing impatient. Her mother turned away in silence and waved a wooden spoon above her head and did a little rumba with her ample hips. Dorothy followed the stairs up to her attic room. She lay down on her bed and looked up at the ceiling. Now that she was at home, she could relax for a while. After dinner, she might throw herself into the future, like some dart, aerodynamic and balanced with a metal tip. Just throw the dart and see where it lands after dinner.